So I think it's about that time we talk about No Rest for the Wicked and some changes I and probably a good portion of players would like to see happen or changed in the game. I'm about 100 hours in at this point and have completed every bit of the content multiple times, and while I still have a ton of bills and news to cover about No Rest for the Wicked, I feel like my time investment give me enough information and understanding of the game to maybe share with you things I would like to be added or changed or at least considered. Some of this will be personal, I'll try to keep that to a minimum, but for the most part I'll not only speak for myself but try to speak for members in the community that have left comments, because of course I love giving players a voice. Again, please leave your comments down in the comment section so that the devs can see it. It does look like the devs are taking feedback, so this is a great way to possibly get that out to the devs, as I'll be posting it in their major channels. With that said, let's talk about changes that definitely needs to happen in No Rest for the Wicked. So the first thing that absolutely needs to happen is clarity. The biggest problem I think No Rest for the Wicked has right now is understanding what exactly everything does. For example, when it comes to runes, it's very hard to tell what they do exactly. The information on them is very bad and or non-existent, and while I can slot them in and understand exactly how much focus is consumed, it would be nice if this was given into the tooltip itself with a brief description of kinda what it does. This also extends to stats. For example, I have no clue what armor does. Of course I know that it reduces physical damage, but how much armor reduction does that do? Is there a cap on this? What is the cap? How much armor is too much armor? Is there diminishing returns? Simple things like that that are not present in the game, and to be honest, when making builds, I don't know how much armor is needed. This is a small example of the problem when it comes to the clarity of the game. There are many others in the game that needs clarity. So when it comes to my first change that definitely needs to happen is basically clarity, because as it stands right now, I don't know what items or some of the stats do. Next, let's talk about crafting, and in this section, some of this is going to be things I would like to see, as well as some things are going to be fairly important to the game as well. Now I know right now this is still early access and the crafting system doesn't necessarily have the greatest of depth. With that in mind, I love to see a few things. First, I would love the ability to make perfect items. One of the most important things in games like Diablo and Path of Exile is the possibility of being able to make the best possible item available. Of course, not every player is going to be able to craft the best and slot perfect item. That is not realistic, but having the possibility of doing so is something that's important to that game, as well as should be important in my opinion to No Rest for the Wicked. Currently as it stands, you can do it, but it is near impossible and in a bad way. Let's say for example I get lucky and I roll a piece of gear or armor that has the stats that I want. That's already in itself is a pretty tough feat, but let's say we get that. After that, we'll have to upgrade our gear. We'll have to hope that it has the runes, the piece of gear that we found, by the way, I like to point out on some of them. And once we finally get to the gem section, you have a chance to roll between a certain number and a certain number, meaning that you very well could get a really low roll. Let's say I get the perfect FXs, I get the perfect piece of gear, I get the perfect runes on it, and then whenever I put in the gem, it's just dead, it's just bricked, or I wanted to use it for a different build. The gem system currently in the game just stops you from being able to really maximize the build and making that perfect piece of gear. For example, when I was playing today, I had a really nice mallet that has a lot of fire on it, and then the game rolled back. That is a problem in itself. I don't want to cover anything related to performance and stability because I know this is early access, but when I came back, I lost all the upgrades on it and I had to redo it again. And when I rolled my gem this time, I got a really low roll, but the weapon is so good itself that I just have to tolerate the really bad roll on the gem. There needs to be a system that makes it so that I can maybe take it out, or even if it destroys the gem, I don't even care if it destroys the gem itself. I just want to be able to craft that perfect gear, and as it stands, in my opinion, it's really hard to craft something perfect and it borders on near impossible. Now I understand maybe the No Rest for the Wicked devs want the game to be a little bit more hardcore, but I think there's other ways you can do this without harming the thing that is objectively the most important part of the game, and that is gearing. While we're on the subject of crafting, I would love to see the crafting expanded upon. While we have for now is really cool, I feel like there could be more customizability when it comes to the crafting. Personally, I like to see a currency that you can farm around the world that can be used to craft specific affixes. I know this is going to sound very Path of Exile like, and if I'm being honest, it is, but I would love to see the ability to fully customize every part of the gear, using an item to make it magic or adding certain affixes, and thereafter upgrading it to a cursed item using a cursed currency. Again, it doesn't have to be super easy to craft gear, I just would love it to be a little bit more customizable. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth on this specific subject because I would like to actually structure what I'm talking about and send it off to the devs so they understand the system, but ultimately I'd love to see a little bit more in-depth crafting outside of just clicking the enchanting button and then slapping in a gem. On the last subject of talking about itemization and crafting, I would like to see enablers, and what I mean by this is I like to see things that enable certain type of builds. Currently, when it comes to focus style builds, as far as I know, the only thing I could think of is focus on hit and then the regeneration, which isn't working right now if I'm not mistaken. I would like to really see other ways to enable those type of builds outside of just simply using those two modifiers. Again, I don't want this to be too heavy into Path of Exile or Diablo, but I would love to possibly see a skill tree system that's pretty tame and simple that almost anyone can use. I think it would add a lot of customization to the builds, as long as you don't overdo it and make it too hard for players to understand. Moving on to a little bit more gameplay focus on changes I like to see, the major would be centered around the Crucible, and that's getting some maps or newer maps. I think the Crucible is pretty fun. It's not the most fun thing, but it's fun. Giving it a bit more maps or a variety of maps could be really cool. You can even go as far as to getting a new ember, a different type of ember that drops around the world that can be used to basically open a different set of serum crucibles, and that would be really cool. I do have a personal gripe when it comes to the Crucible though. I don't really like the way that the mobs are positioned. In some cases, they're placed in ways that makes it so you die to fall damage. I'm not a fan of that. I love when players die from the lack of skill, not from mobs standing 3 stories up and pushing you off and killing you while you're trying to cross over to kill them, since it's required for you to kill them to get over to the next part of the Crucible. It feels really crappy to die to. It's like really crappy gameplay, and I feel like it only pisses players off, especially when you're dying to crappy things like fall damage. I wouldn't be mad if it was 1 or 2 places, but I do find it to be pretty heavy in the game, and I'm not a fan of it. And if I'm being completely honest, the majority of my deaths in the Crucible are due to being pushed off ledges, and that again feels really crappy. Next, let's talk about multiplayer, and once multiplayer is added to the game, I would like to see some raid style content. Currently, it's pretty easy to make in my opinion. There's already tanks that have the ability to taunt, there's already healing spells that have the ability to heal, we have damage dealing skills, so it's already in the game, so I don't think that would be very difficult to really get working. I would love to jump into a mission and just have 4 friends go do a raid. It doesn't necessarily need to be queued into anything. It can be, but like some huge open world bosses that has a like red skull would be really cool. Stuff like that. Again, I know that multiplayer is going to be the next major update, but yeah, I would like to see that sometime in the future. Now, I can't really think of anything else that I would like to see changed or down in my chat. I'll make a second video if I get enough like responses and or I think of something. These are the major problems that I'm seeing in the game, and honestly, I am a massive fan of No Rest for the Wicked. I think it actually has a lot to offer, and once things are implemented into the game that make them less annoying or adds a lot to the game, I really can see this game being like really big. Anyways, that is all for this one. Down in the description, feel free to check out any of the other content that you see on this channel. I make builds, tips and tricks, all that kinds of stuff, so check that out. The pinned comment will be my affiliate link. If you haven't gotten the game yet, you can still get 20% off until Thursday, so make sure to take advantage of that. I get a little bit of a kickback, so that would be really nice. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.